Hello, and welcome back to the Collector's Corner, the podcast that demystifies art collecting with me, Antonia Piersanti. Today, I'm super happy to have Rachel Verghis on the podcast. Rachel is a former investment banker, London-based, who, without any formal art training or exposure to art growing up, decided to take the plunge into the art world. She took a sabbatical to volunteer at a gallery in her hometown of Sydney. She later worked for a few months at Sotheby's, and that's how she started on a fantastic and prolific collector journey now for the past 25 years. Rachel perfectly bridges the gap between business and art. She runs her own company, a gin brand called Margin. She sits on several institutional boards, the Hayward Gallery, Tate, the British Council, among others. She drives and supports multiple artistic projects, which we discuss, including a super exciting new triennial. I'm not sure how she does it all, but it was very inspiring to talk about all this with her. Rachel is deeply passionate about bringing art to as many people as possible, and this really came through in our conversation. She was one of the first people I had on my radar when the idea of this podcast started solidifying. I'm super grateful she opened up so generously about her collecting journey. I leave you to enjoy our extremely rich conversation, and as usual, all references are in the show notes. Okay, so Rachel, hello. Thank you
Hello.
for having me.
Very, very lovely to be here. Lovely to be here.
Yeah, I'm super excited. Like I was saying, I'm super excited to be doing this. You were one of the first people I spotted when I started acting on this idea of a podcast that's been in my head for a few years now. So yeah, thank you for agreeing. So we are in London where you're based and you've lived for a long time.
30 plus years now.
30 years.
I came when I was 25, so yeah, just under.
But
No, a little bit long. Yeah, much more. So I'm 54 now. So yeah, around 26, I arrived in London.
And you grew up in Australia?
Malaysia,
Malaysia.
initially, and I was born there and lived there for about 12, 13 years, I think, and then moved to Sydney in my sort of teenage years. Yeah, and I am Australian now, a passport, and British as well. So it's a combination.
Okay.
All these two things.
I read that you're from a family of doctors.
Yeah.
And you yourself studied finance and
I
economics.
did finance and economics, yeah.
And then went into banking for your career.
Yes, I did. Yes, I really didn't know what I wanted to do. I was never talented enough to be an artist or anything creative, but I was just always drawn to things that were creative. But I came from a family where, it was very important to get a vocational education, and art never ever featured. I can tell you that I grew up in a house with not a single piece of proper art on the walls, or any kind of art education. It was all science and math, and in that sort of typical Southeast Asian families, where academics was just king. And so yeah, I can say there's been absolutely no influence growing up in any of what I've ended up sort of collecting and being at all.
Yeah, because I mean, I think what happened from what I read is you took a sabbatical and went to volunteer for a gallery.
Yes.
Why then?
Why?
What attracted you
Oh, I
to?
tell you what, I've always collected small little bits, so nothing formal like walking to a gallery and looking at a practice, but I was so intimidated by the whole structure, the art buying, ecosystem. I'd walk past galleries and think, oh gosh, I couldn't go in. I was quite timid, I'd say. And it came about because my sister, she lived next door to one of Sydney's, most famous art gallerists, Jean Sherman. And she mentioned it once. She said, oh, my sister Rachel just loves your gallery, but too scared to walk in. She goes, oh, nonsense. She has to come in. So I really do credit Jean Sherman for giving me the courage, I think, to start at least thinking I could sort of inhabit this world, even if I wasn't fully a part of it. And she, she said, look, come, take a sabbatical, come and work for me. I'll teach you everything I know. And she She did. I had to, catalog her library and, wash up the dishes and do all the sort of, be like a docent, like a runner in a way. And in the spare time, she taught me about Australian art and some foreign Japanese and Chinese art. And it was my first proper piece of art was purchased from there. Again, like Klarna, I paid just a little bit and often because I think I was 31 at this time. And I didn't have money, everything I earned would go to pay my rent and whatnot. So it started then and then it has not stopped. It has not stopped.
And that made you pivot then away from banking?
No, I continued banking until I had my son Louis. So that was always my day job. I took some breaks. I did go to work for Sotheby's for a couple of months, and when I could, I would, sort of in one or two galleries, but nothing seriously. I did some courses and nothing formal, no formal training, nothing of the sort. Banking was my vocation, and it allowed me, especially towards the end, to afford more art, bigger pieces. And to this day, I still have, my portfolios running. I manage my own money. So that's never left. That is my day job still. But I do now work for myself and I work at home. It's not large, but it's enough to sustain the lifestyle I have. I dabbled, like I said, for about 6 or 7 months, helping friends buy art and working for Sotheby's. That I did 3 months there, or less than 3 months actually. And I've helped if, an artist, Carolyn Rothwell, put on a show in London. And where I can, I've helped. But then I realized quite quickly that I am not a good salesperson. The thought of going after banking into art for a very short period of time.
You mean professionally?
Professionally, perhaps
full-time.
working in a gallery or, going back to school full time. I realized very quickly that wasn't for me. But I've always collected for myself, and that just then continued, Yeah, from that point onwards, manically.
Obviously, you work for yourself now. You have a gym brand.
Mhm.
You have an accessories brand also.
I did. I started a phone case company with the idea of putting art on phone cases. And I did one memorable project. It didn't make me any money. It was quite a bit of a folly and it was difficult to produce in China. But I did a project with Ai Weiwei and Amnesty International. And I love how that came about. Ai Weiwei had done a series on prisoners of conscience in Lego in Alcatraz in San Francisco. And we took those photographs onto phone cases and sold the phone cases. So 186 prisoners of conscience, everyone from Aung San Suu Kyi to Mahatma Gandhi to, it was a beautiful project. And you could buy these phone cases and monies would go to Amnesty International. So that was a short-lived couple of years when I was foraying and making art on various different things, but phone cases mainly didn't really take off, unfortunately. So that's a shelved company. And then outside of that, there are projects that I like. I sort of support sort of anonymously.
Mhm.
I'd say almost 3/4 of my projects are anonymous contributions to getting things done. And 1 or 2 I do put my names on. Yeah.
About the phone cases, is that important for you, the political dimension of art?
No, I don't think so. I mean, that was a particularly political,
Mm.
statement, I think, and it was important for it to get out. At the time, I felt quite strongly about the message. But do I sort of seek out art with a political angle, or am I drawn to it particularly? No. I've had this question asked quite a few times, and it might be a follow-up question on how I know something belongs to me. And it's so viscerally emotional for me when I stand in front of something and I just connect with it completely. And that's how I collect, I think. It helps by sort of a process of osmosis. I think I'm taking in information. And I understand now, I've trained my eye. I certainly didn't have any of that at the beginning. Though when I go back now and look at some of my very early pieces that I bought with so much less experience, I'm still struck that I've always been very true to my own vision, I think, of buying what I like, not what I've been told or what is popular. So that has followed through the collection, yeah.
Do you see a thread then from since you started collecting to now? You see a cohesion in your collection that kind of came about almost
There's a lot
unconsciously?
of figurative. I would say that's definitely something I'm attracted to. Have abstract, I have sculpture, I have a lot of things, but a lot of the art I have is quite unsettling. I don't know what it is. There's something about it that has moved something like a needle or something in me. And, they're not to everybody's taste. People come into my home and come away. Some works are so polarizing, but I know they've stuck in their minds and thought, oh gosh, really don't like this. Or I really like this, but I don't know why. It's always because they have done something, they've moved something emotionally. It could even be disgust. It doesn't have to be something so positive, In everyone that looks at these pieces, there always seems to elicit a response. I do not have a lot of decorative art, because it looks pretty. Very rarely makes it into my collection. I also don't like art that you have to really delve into it. So it comes with a lot of text. Maybe I have adult ADHD, but if I don't get the message or I don't get that emotional bang, hit, I get bored. I literally get bored. I do believe there's place for all this type of art, and it really feeds the soul of a lot of people. But for me, I like things to make me feel something. And that tends to be almost within the first minute, sometimes the first image. I don't know what it is, but then I think, yeah, I love it.
How important then is it for you to meet the artist or understand their thought process of what they were trying to convey, as opposed to how you react and how you feel about an artwork?
Yeah, I would say almost never at this point. I have now, because I have a slightly more public sort of persona now, that some artists come up to me and I have met some artists that I have collected, but just inadvertently, so I've haven't gone specifically out to seek them. And if I do come to visit their studios, I do it quite quietly. So I come with a group, or I don't announce, because I actually sometimes just want to come and see any more work. If I like something of theirs, I tend to seek it out, whether it's on Instagram. I mean, I doom scroll art all night. I'm looking at art all the time. I get up in the morning, or I'm reading something or whatever, and then if it's someone I've purchased before and I like what I have, I'm always curious to see what are they doing next, But meeting them, no, I don't think that's ever been for some people it is very important, and I get it. I get you get the full experience.
Yeah.
You understand where they've come from. The process sometimes is so convoluted making it. Then it's interesting to art, but then I can see myself completely tuning out. Like if you explain to me how that extraordinary photograph is done technically, you've lost me in 30 seconds, because I have no interest in that, It's always just capturing the image, or yeah, it's always the image.
Have there been any particularly memorable studio visits or artist encounters?
Yeah, yes. I think a most recent one was George Roy, so he lives in a converted church. And I was just, it felt really voyeuristic. He was so generous in letting us come in. And it was walking into his bedroom and his bathroom and his kitchen and seeing bits of unfinished work and really quite raw, things that actually gave him ideas and, his inspirations, etc. in this, the most extraordinary space. And it all led to the heightenedness of this kind of slightly surreptitious meeting. And we're coming into this a little bit like Clockwork Orange, actually. I don't know why. Slightly menacing experience. I loved it. I absolutely loved it. And we started at his studio, and then to see the raw works, and this was just before the Hauser show. It was beautiful. I really enjoyed it. That I really enjoyed. But, could have gone the other way as well. And I have quite a few Roys,
You already had them
yeah,
at the time
yeah.
to visit.
I liked them quite early on. I find that I don't have the funding, to buy them when they're sort of mid-market or later. So I buy them really quite emerging. And George had started with Hannah Barry, who I think is fantastic, and has had a lot of her young artists are just really good caliber. And I remember seeing the first piece I bought, and he didn't even have a space to paint, I think, at the time. So Hannah had given him a little bit of space to paint, or had just taken it out of his bedroom or something, this work, and brought it fresh to the gallery. And it was after her first show, which I missed, of his first show. And she called me up and said, "Do you want this young painter?" His name's George Roy. And I walked into the gallery and just took one look at it, and I thought, "I'll take it." I didn't even ask how much it was or what it was about or whether I could even fit it through the door. It was 3 meters long. So I had this like 2 by 3 meter George Roy. I just looked at it and I said, "Hannah, I'll take it." Like it was like bang, right between the eyes. And it's not to everybody's taste. Like it's up on my wall now. And people look at it and go, what is this? Oh, I love this painting. I can't even explain his practice or what it was all about or why I love it. I can't see myself not living with it anymore, So I think that's how I buy.
Are there, especially in the beginning when you started out and you mentioned this first gallery that you worked for in Sydney, who have been the key influential people in your art
Galleries
journey?
and
Not
in the art
necessarily.
journey.
Yeah.
That's interesting, actually. I think from a very early stage, I had access to lots. And as soon as I decided this is where I wanted to be, or this ecosystem outside of banking is where I like to hang out. I loved all of it. I was very lucky to have friends who collected at the time or made friends, almost always older than me. So when I was in my 30s, I had friends in their 50s and 60s and some seasoned collectors, started to be invited to their homes and see the type of how they collect.
Where did you meet them?
Well, Sydney started with Jean Sherman, and then it's just getting into the art world that way. So I volunteering at Jean Sherman's gallery. I did meet a lot of the Australian collectors. They've all been so incredibly generous, opening their hearts, their knowledge, their homes. So that's where that started. Over here, probably more when after working for Sotheby, so 2008. So not from the very beginning. I met some very extraordinary collectors here as well. Learning that way has been probably quite influential. But then again, I think back, even now, my taste didn't so much mirror anybody's. I remember even in Australia, when I started after my first, second, third, fourth pieces, I was buying paintings and having artists come and graffiti walls around paintings and, so.
In your home?
In my home.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Because it was never decorative.
Yeah.
Nothing was, I'll find a piece to match that sofa. Never happens. So artists would come and experiment in the house, and the more experimental, the better for me. I remember Patrick Goddard, who's the artist I collect here too, quite in depth. He wanted to, which we haven't gotten around to doing, was to put a carpet on my floor, place the carpet that I had in my living room here, throw acid on the carpet, and get people to walk across the carpet. And that would, and their shoes would burn into the acid off the carpet. And I actually said yes, but we never got around to doing it. Not for once thinking the acid could splash on the other works or on the sofa or on the floor. It was like, yes, let's do it.
Yeah.
It's so weird.
So do you see yourself also like a patron, right? You're not just a collector.
Yeah, that's been bandied around a bit, actually. I think yes, probably, but very loosely, I think, at the moment, because I don't think I've set out to be a patron, but because I'm also, I think, attracted more to the younger and slightly more unseen artists. That word is bandied around, I think, too frequently. I love, if I can get involved, especially it's something I have never seen before, something new, I'm there. I like it very much. I think, as an agent of not having enough money, a consequence of not having the big spending budget, I haven't collected. And actually, when I think about it now, I don't know if I would have collected the same sort of things you see in a lot of homes, kind of that blue chip art that people buy because it's only ever going to go up in value, and then you flip it or not. That hasn't been something that I've experienced. I had a very limited budget, and I started late-ish.
Yeah.
And I would say now, even in my 50s, I still buy quite modestly amount-wise, but they're always interesting works, So one of the things I get the most actually after people come to my home is, I've never seen that before, or that's something new, and so they would have done a lot of homes, patrons' homes, etc. But something really original and quirky or different, they would see it mine, because they sort of give a lot of credence, I suppose, to this younger artist doing different things. And that's not because I just find it much more interesting, to see what this new generation is doing. That's also why I buy contemporary and not modern, even if I had the money to do modern. But it's because I think we do have a real responsibility to our time, which is why I like contemporary architecture and contemporary design. I do love vintage pieces, but contemporary design and contemporary art is our responsibility, I think, to support.
Why?
Really, it's our time. We can engage with the practice. The influences may or may not be similar, but I do feel like we have a responsibility to our time. Who else is going to help? And maybe in that sense, I am a patron, and I think it's really important that of those who means, buy one piece, or two pieces. You don't have to go crazy, but you contribute to the discourse. I think it's very important, of the current discourse. And one way you can do that is through culture, right? I've picked contemporary art because I love it, but, there's many other ways to support. There's theatre and ballet and, opera. But pick one, I think it's really important. And I do feel like I'm giving back a bit as well when I do it,
That's interesting.
And also it's very, very satisfying for me, and I feel great pleasure when I see something come to fruition.
This reminds me of something I read also about you. You collected quite a bit of digital arts.
I did. I was very curious about digital art when it came about, and I didn't know enough. So I hired someone to help me with this, a very young curator. And he taught me, I was very young, so he taught me the ins and outs of cryptocurrency and the blockchain, and and understanding how digital art was made, how it functioned, how it sat, where it was in the canon, and where it was going. I have collected, so I do still have a portfolio, and I've paused it a little bit, but I will continue. My worry a little bit with it is I felt like I could not always connect with the work. I was missing that spark I usually get when I saw something physical, because a lot of it was quite theoretical, the NFTs. You would get one image and then you'd get an essay, and you'd have to understand where it sat in the oeuvre and what the artist was trying to do. And some of it just went over my head. Even when I was quite diligent trying to understand it. So I did collect. I have paused. I will restart next year. I've said to myself now, because it is important. It is a way a lot of art might go, and I need to understand what's being done. Yeah.
What do you mean by a lot of art might go?
It's another medium now. It's another medium for everything, I think, now, with AI coming on board as well, featuring quite strongly everywhere. sometimes as you get older, you think, no, this is the too hard basket, and
Yeah.
I'm not going to. I'm really trying not to fall in that, And if art is being produced now, even art being produced by machines, I want to understand what it is. Is it something I'll collect? I'm not sure, but it's certainly something I'm going to go back into, next year.
How do you stay on top of these?
The internet, the easiest and quickest way. My For You page, everything sort of brings me, a lot of new art, new artists. I very recently discovered some apps, so I do Docent, a fantastic app actually, and a good friend's initiative for 5 years. Artsy, interestingly, I do look at Artsy. And the latest one I've been sort of scrolling through and have purchased my first piece of artwork through there is Gertrude. So Gertrude, especially for, if you have a question about the younger collectors, I would suggest get this app. It's so well curated of really young and up and coming emerging artists.
Mm-hmm.
You can buy artworks for £150. I bought a piece recently. It was a fork. It was my first piece, and it was a fork that stuck out of the wall with hair. Her name was Janula something, I think, the artist. It was called Cater Fork. It was a hairy fork. It was so fabulous. Like, I couldn't stop looking at it. Like, it came. So it was like a fork with eyelashes, but it had hair all the way on the fork. And I know that sounds absolutely awful.
I would love to see it.
Yeah, exactly. I'll send you a photograph.
Yes.
And I was scrolling. I thought, gosh, I really like this. I don't know why I like this. I like this so much. And then I looked at the price and I thought, that cannot be the price of this. And it was a unique piece.
Yeah.
And I bought it immediately. The other day as well, I was again sort of scrolling late in the night, and there's another platform, Avant Art, which is very good as well. And they were running a ballot
Mm-hmm.
for a Maurizio Catalan piece. And it's just a figurine of him, and I'll send that to you as well. So it's a hand-painted image of Maurizio Catalan hanging from a hook.
Uh-huh.
So he's hung himself on the door like a coat. It's only this big. And you had to put your name in the ballot and put your credit card details in. And I got one.
Oh, wow.
It's unbelievable. And then I was talking to someone about it, and I said, I cannot believe I was one of 50. I think there's only 50, and they're being hand painted. He's going to start painting them next year, and then they'll start delivering from June. And you just hang it at the back of the wall. So like a tiny little Maurizio Catalan. And then someone said to me, whatever you paid for it is now 100x, because it'll be like the banana or something.
Yeah. Yeah.
I can't imagine that would happen, but because so many people are like, God, I've missed out. I hope I get one, and I thought that was a very interesting way of actually getting this new generation, like my son, with this a bit of gambling, a bit of gamification,
Yeah.
in the art world. I mean, I love Maurizio Catalan. I met him, a couple of times, and I love this idea of him hanging himself off the wall.
Yeah.
And it was a really beautifully done work, or at least the image of it. So that was a very interesting way of selling art too, I thought. And, for your younger audiences, these platforms are just crucial, I think. Really helps the artist and really helps the art buyer.
Yeah, I did actually have a question about the younger generation of collectors, because you're obviously very well connected in the scene here in London and internationally. What do you see in this new wave of collector that's new?
Yeah, it's amazing actually. They're much younger. They have a lot of money. Could just be some of the circles that I'm in, maybe the Serpentine patrons, Tate Young patrons. But yes, they're very knowledgeable actually. They come in perhaps with the help of art advisors, I don't know for sure.
Right.
But they've done their due diligence, and they buy with intent. I've always had a problem with this buying art as an asset for, as another asset class.
Yeah.
Lots and lots and lots of people do it. And I think it's a great asset class. I think people have made so much money on this.
You mean, so people who really just buy to sell, to make a profit?
They buy with the intent of holding for an increase in value, yes.
Yeah.
So there wouldn't be anything they would buy and say, oh,
Included
because
things they might not like, is what you're saying.
exactly,
Yeah. Okay.
exactly. So I wonder how much of the I truly love this artist, or let me be first in line to be able to get a piece because I know it's going to go up. I find the younger collector that is it plays a part to varying degrees. It never played the part for me as an older collector, someone in my 30s. I never thought, I'm buying this, I hope it goes up. I always bought because I want to own it. I want it in my house. I want it when I open my eyes. I want to look at it. So I've been lucky. Some of the works I've purchased has gone up in value, but I've only ever had to sell a selection of artworks once when I ran out of money in my sort of in my late 30s, and I was sort of forced to sell a collection. I wish I didn't. And I have mentioned in public once that I've tried to buy them all back.
Oh, really?
Yeah, not successfully. Some have just completely disappeared, but I've tried to at least buy something similar or buy the actual work back. It was just about the only time I can think of that I really, needed the money and I needed to do it. I was very desperate. It was about 14, 15 years ago. But I buy only now to own. Yeah.
So you never sell?
No, not if I can help it. I sold a team lab work that I had very recently because I have never been able to make it work properly.
In your flat?
Yeah. It was in my home in Sydney, and then it came here and we took it out, and part of the risks of buying digital art is this obsolescence that's built in with the hardware, some of the software, and there isn't always the ability to address it at an artist level, and we just couldn't get this thing to work properly, so I did sell it, I think, at a bit of a loss, to someone who was going to see if they could. And that was the last piece I did at Phillips, actually, at the auction house. And outside of that, no, nothing.
You're running out of space, I'm sure, then.
Yeah, I have a storage room.
Right.
Yeah, definitely. There is not enough space for the art I buy. I find now I am attracted to smaller pieces because I want to live with them.
Yeah.
And so I tend to go for things, and I'm buying sculpture because you can always put things on the ground, on the floor and things, and small things like the cater forks and things, which I love because they're kind of whimsical and give me a little bit of joy when I wake up and look at them. I like that. So, but like the big 3-4 meters, harder now. Yeah. Because, I really kind of have to destroy windows, and I never think about it. I buy the work and then I think, how am I going to get this in? Or, and then a window has to come out, or doors have to come out.
Oh, wow.
Things have to be unstretched and stretched again. It's crazy.
You mentioned you bought on apps, so you've bought online, obviously the galleries, auction too. Do you buy sometimes at art fairs?
Well, yes. Yes, I have bought an art fairs. Not often. I find that I use that more as learning. I walk around, I see things I like, has actually trained my eye. But I have bought at auction. Oh, sorry, at art fairs, yes. But no, not often. I'm not so prolific that I go in and I go, oh, let's 5 pieces here or there.
Yeah.
But one thing I have noticed with auctions, things come out in the surrounding as well. And I've seen stuff at fairs, and then something else has come out that has been outside of the fair, and then that's become much more interesting.
You mean in parallel to the fair?
Parallel to the fair, and then I pick up something at the fair, outside, either gallery or a private. I bought recently from another private owner who wanted to sell something that I had been looking for a long while. Something I saw, gosh, I want to say almost 10 years ago, I think, by Mika Rottenberg, who I love. And I can't believe it's available. And so that's something I think if I can next week, I'll fly to Berlin and see if it's installed and I can go and see it and make an offer for it. So I've seen the work and it's gone and done a big round and it comes to me.
Yeah.
Like if it's meant to be with me, it will find its way back. And this Mika Rottenberg piece, 100%.
When did you see it for the first time?
Oh gosh, just talking to the gallerist about it, and I felt like I said 10 years, but then I don't think my son was born then, so it could have been 15 years ago.
Yeah.
I just don't understand why it's still available. It's not to everybody's liking. It's a kinetic work, and I don't have a kinetic work. It's a ponytail of someone's hair, so it's actually a ponytail. It comes out of the wall like a horsetail, and if you go close to it, it flicks up. It's like a horse, it flicks its tail. Yes.
That's cool.
Yeah.
It's really cool.
Isn't that cool? Yeah, I love
Yeah.
it. It's not for everyone. They did say I need to build a false wall because the mechanism is behind the wall.
Interesting.
And there's a sensor because
Yeah.
you can set it on a loop or a sensor. And I think I like the idea of it just being on the wall quietly until someone went up, on a sensor. I don't know if I'll get it. It's on hold till I get to Berlin. But I quite like the idea of this work. Yeah.
In parallel to your collecting, I mean, you're very active, right? You said you look at art all the time.
I do look at art all the time.
Whether, online or physical, real life. You obviously have your businesses. You also sit on boards.
Yeah. That's a big responsibility. It's a good one. It's teaching me a lot of discipline, that one. It really does, because I go and see how things are run, the mechanisms, the machinations, if that's a word, machinations behind, an institution or a gallery or foundation. So I sit on, like, for the Tate and Hayward Gallery and patron of Serpentine and just one or two others. And they are British Council that gives me just unparalleled access to the back and the running and meeting of the artists. And I love it. It's brought a whole new dimension into it. It's made it even more interesting for me to go out and collect now because I see it, I see how it works, how it runs. I get before hours access to some beautiful shows. After hours, I get to meet the artists sometimes. I listen to, world-class curators speak. So yeah, it has been fantastic. I hope I can give back,
I was going to ask you about that because, I mean, your journey, it's so impressive. You were saying you were intimidated to walk into a gallery. I can totally relate to that.
A lot of
And
people.
now you sit on, the Tate International Council and countless other boards. You have an amazing collection. So in what ways would you like to pay it forward?
Well, I have a lot of crazy projects. I started having salons at home, small and large, for different, Biennale breakfasts or panel talk, Association of Women in the Arts, talking to collectors, and that has kind of evolved very loosely into salons at my home in that sort of old-fashioned way, when you'd get a whole variety of different types of people come and sit on your couch and argue, literally, for their point of view. And and I found it so interesting. I mean, I'd get this amazing buzz out of gathering all these people, and seeing them all sort of argue. And they were never always easy topics. It could be contentious, and I kind of like sit there going, God, this is fantastic. This is fantastic. One of them, the last one I did before everything fell apart, was Linda Sterling, Rachel Thomas, Christian Levette, and in discussions, sort of moderated by Maria Suka. And it was on female desire collecting and female desire and collecting. Very interesting, different points of view on female art on that panel. At the end of it, Linda Sterling, who had just had an extraordinary show at the Hayward, got up and she said, anyone who's female or identifies as female, come into the bathroom and I'll take a photograph of you. And so what she did was and there was this long line outside my guest loo, and she made everybody straddle the toilet. She took a martini glass, and you had to hold this martini glass in front of your face, and she took a photograph of you through the martini glass. Anyway, at the time, I think Ralph, who was neither female or identified as female, was just watching this. Ralph Rugoff, who runs the Hayward, and he said he had never seen an artist so spontaneously want to create work as she was just decided to do it.
Yeah.
And then about a week or two later, this this talk came about maybe publishing some of these images into a book, a Hayward publication.
Yeah.
And we'd be one of the first to see it.
Oh my
In
God.
the spirit of Linda.
And that's from
Yes,
that
from that-
night.
yes. So
That's
that is an
amazing.
example of, so I'll give you a copy of that. It's an example of how this sort of came about. Unbelievable. So there's an essay by Linda and Rachel Thomas, and just a sort of a thank you from me at back. And it's kind of my first publication. And that, I can tell you,
Congratulations.
I cannot
That's
believe
fantastic.
it. I love it. I love it. So
That's brilliant.
yeah, I really am so happy with it, you know.
I feel like this is such a busy season, right? For art.
Absolutely. It is, yeah, very much so. And if I didn't have responsibilities, I think I would just be looking at art all the time.
But how do you do it? I mean, you have
Yeah, it's a
all the
lot.
collecting, like
Yeah.
we said, the boards, your
Yeah.
own business, you're a single mom, so it's a
I
lot.
don't sleep much. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's always a bit of like go, go, go. And, I think that bit I definitely need to slow down a bit. So I'm very happy about the book.
That's
The
wonderful.
Goddess Lunch was something that came about. That was also really, so it just fell together so well. I had this idea about getting all these fabulous women in the art world to come and have a fantastic lunch, a get together. And then I talked to a friend of mine who's just done so much in the art world, Sigrid Kirk, with Awita. We're like, let's do it. And we call it the Goddess Lunch, because we're all goddesses. And then I was out one night and I was talking to a friend of mine who was about to join Bonhams. And I said, I have this great, she's head of private clients. And I said, Adriana, I'm thinking of doing this. She goes, let's see if Bonhams would sponsor it. And that's how that came about. So Bonhams, and most grateful to them, sponsored the inaugural Goddess Lunch of, celebrating female cultural leadership.
Yeah.
And I hope to do it every year. So that's the Goddess Lunch. And my last project is, so I went to see Christian Levet's amazing museum of female art, and he very generously flew me to his home in Florence as well. So I saw the museum, his beautiful home in Mougins, and then his beautiful home in Florence. And I remember thinking, sort of, especially when I was in Mougins, how many amazing museums there are there. And how fantastic to start a triennial of female art, almost like an art walk, like a pilgrimage once every 3 years. And of course, starting a triennial is expensive and unwieldy. And as I speak to you now, I can't tell you whether I'd ever get this off the ground, but I would love to. I thought, well, the way to do this is we get a female and male curators to write the theme. And then we harness as many private museums in the stretch of south of France, quite a top heavy with museums, and get them all to program their space for 3 months during the time of it under this unifying theme of the triennial, because they have to program their space anyway. So there is a sunk cost. We just get them to commit to doing 3 months under the unifying theme, right? And then we have an art walk.
Yeah.
We start in Monaco and we go all the way down to Arles.
Yeah.
I really want to get this off the ground.
So you don't need a dedicated space.
I still think we need an arsenale, but I have asked Chateau Lacoste, I've asked Paddy, if he would be interested in giving us one of his big outdoor spaces, which can then be programmed, with his stuff, or everyone lends him the stuff. We haven't actually worked out, and that could be ground zero. But I would almost start from the top. But you could do it the other way around. You could start at Chateau Lacoste and go all the way up to Monaco. And that would be the art walk. And we do it in the month of April or May, before it starts to get really busy. And you can walk it, or you cycle it, or you motorcycle it, or you fast car it, or whatever.
Yeah.
But it is a female-led, female artist triennial. Goddess triennial.
Goddess triennial. Yeah. There you go.
Yeah.
That's super exciting.
Yeah. Well,
hope it
I
works.
tell you about it. Like, ask me next year, because it's a little harder than I thought. So I can't do much now, but I am going to really throw myself into looking at all the museums and, working out how to get there.
Amazing. Well, follow that closely. How do you see collectors' responsibilities evolving in this day and age? Because you talked about cultural discourse and a responsibility to our time. now that there's so much pressure around museums, financially, but also ethically, how do you see collectors playing into that dynamic?
Friends I know who are collectors, who have got lovely collections. And to what end? You could collect till you dropped dead, but there has to be some kind of succession.
Yeah.
I can speak from my own experience. I have now, a collection of art that is larger than what you could put up in a home, and I feel some responsibility for it. I have one son who really just doesn't, he is still young, but I don't think he will take this forward, in any sort of serious way. So I have about 30 years, still quite a long time to think about what I'm going to do with this. I have such a, sadness about selling this works, but I also conversely feel like it is really important to not have them in storage. These works meant to be seen and enjoyed. So I have this idea, and one of my sort of towards the end of my life, but I can start working on now, is a museum, a space, a foundation, a warehouse. It doesn't have to be something so grand, and a donation of all the works, except for a few pieces that my son wants to collect, into somewhere or space which is accessible for all. So, in terms of responsibility, that's actually an overwhelming one for collectors like myself who have done this, over many, many years, decades by the time I get this into a coherency that, has some kind of perpetuity. I think it is important we all think about what and where this is going. Why are we doing this? And where does it sit in the discourse, and how important it is to keep it so it's forever.
So you think about legacy?
I do, actually. I've started very much thinking about it now. And, I owe it to the artists, I think. They've done this. These pieces are, some of them are so important. Early collection works that I have of their practice. Where are they going? They're not sitting in in my storage room forever. Will need to have a place. Yeah. Important. That is a responsibility. Yeah.
We talked about your many ventures. You're an entrepreneur. Do you feel there is things artists and entrepreneurs can learn from each other? Because you bridge the two worlds so well.
I do. I mean, I get asked for funding a lot. I think this is an incredibly real struggle for artists. I think they're totally underfunded. I think government, federal and state, local, don't give enough. I don't think there's enough public art. I think the little public art out there has the most extraordinary reception. I think art saves neighborhoods, pulls people out of poverty, gives people purpose, love for their environment. There is some value in learning about value and commercializing their practice. Entrepreneurs do it very well, obviously, or not so well sometimes. Artists tend to be completely enveloped by their practice. That could be the bridge, I think, a little bit. I think entrepreneurs could do more in bringing art into public spaces.
Yeah.
I think that's important. Private entrepreneurs like myself who support things, etc. But even public, I think government should spend more. I think we should have a percentage of every building built should have an art budget.
Yeah.
That's the connection.
Yeah.
If you look at what Bloomberg does, their app, Bloomberg Connects, that comes from more a entrepreneurial side that's made accessible art that maybe would never be seen at such a wide scale, be accessible in that sort of medias. And that's, I think, the bridge, really. But I do believe we could do more. I don't think we do enough. I'd like to see a lot more art everywhere, really.
Bring art into more spaces.
Absolutely.
Not limited to galleries, museums.
No. Yeah. I know sometimes it has to start there, but it should come out here more. 100%.
I agree.
In public sphere.
So you talked a little bit about the young generation of collectors and how they differ to when you started. What are the biggest challenges that they have to contend with?
Younger collectors without the sort of budget is the one you're talking about.
Yes.
Yeah. I think there is still a very, maybe it's not as pervasive as it used to be, hierarchy of galleries tending only to people they feel they can sell something to, and seriously high money. And I think that's wrong. I used to feel it 30 years ago. I still feel it now, They're not as accessible. They're still not. You walk up and down Cork Street and things, and it's just this kind of barrier to get through and look at this. And you feel like, can I walk up to this £1 million piece of artwork or whatever it is showing $500,000 and be taken seriously? There's almost invariably a cold, disinterested front desk. Do you find that? Right? Almost every single time. And this kind of air that you don't really belong, and right now I feel like in some of these galleries I definitely do belong, and I still get it. I still feel it.
You still get
Oh,
it?
absolutely still feel
Wow.
it, and it's so wrong, I think, that is how art is perceived, this elitist, only available to the very few. And that still pervades, I think, I wish it was a lot more welcoming. However, there are things like Gertrude now that I've found, which I think is so accessible. I wish I had that back 30 years. I'd be so much further along my collecting journey if I had these resources at the tip of my fingertips. A lot of public exhibitions are free.
Yeah.
Go see every single one. I try to make as many as I can. And if you're traveling, try and see one art thing, in every city. I do that all the time. Go to the fairs. The fairs are open, all the art fairs. And it's just the single best way to look at art without the gallery infrastructure around you. Yes, they still will ignore you in the booths, but then you see a curated selection of a lot of things. And that is open to everyone.
Yeah.
If I was a young collector, I'd start there. People poo-poo the art fairs, but I think it's actually quite a good starting ground to see what's out there, what people are collecting, if that's important to you, what is the offering. And then I think in a lot of art fairs now have done this younger sections. I love those. I'm always trawling that. And I would say, go see any of them. I don't know how many art fairs there are now, tremendous amount. And then there's art weeks and gallery opening nights. And, it's such a big roundabout of things now. I wish I had that when I started. So yeah, if you're young, say you want to spend about £500 your total, I'd go and see all the art fairs and get on Gertrude, and you can buy something for £150.
Yeah.
That could be a good start.
I was going to ask you actually what steps you would recommend to someone who's got, let's say, £5,000 to start building a collection.
I think 5,000 you could buy lots. You really can. I would buy the best you can for that amount. 5,000. One extraordinary piece, and if you could stretch it to 5,000, that would be amazing.
So you would buy one piece with 5,000?
I think now I would buy one piece. It is so personal, it really is. For me, I would just say, okay, what can I buy for 5,000? And look quite seriously at a lot of artists coming up and look at their practice. I recommend to try and buy unique pieces if possible, paintings or sculpture that isn't an edition. I find that a little bit more interesting as well. But yeah, try to buy, I would buy one, but it isn't for everyone. If you are just starting out in this just so much and you're in like a toy shop and you think I want this and I want that.
It does feel a bit like that.
It can still be like that. It's super personal as well. And then there are graduate shows. There are open, when the RA do their shows, there's just so many.
So it doesn't have to be through a gallery.
Yeah. Absolutely not. I know they probably won't like hearing that. One benefit of being in a gallery, and it's something I've come to understand more later, is when a gallery has signed an artist, it's an investment into their future works as well. I have been bitten with a sort of an artist buying something and then they've disappeared. They've given up their practice. In fact, the first artworks I own is by a brilliant PhD lecturer who did in photography, Vanilla Netto. And I have 3 pieces of hers. And now I can't even reach her. She stopped practicing and has retired.
Wow.
And I think there is that danger whilst, galleries invest in the artist and then expect longevity. And then there is some expectation of progression, if that's important to you. hard to ask that question of me because I don't buy to sell, so it's neither here nor there for me.
Very
that
personal.
question. Someone else who's probably helping you put together a portfolio that increases in value, they'd say, yeah, buy from galleries. Do your due diligence. Pick young and up-and-coming gallery-supported artists. But because I don't collect like that, I can't advise.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I've got a few more rapid
That's
fire.
Rapid fire.
So what's the last artwork you purchased?
Last artwork, it would be a piece of design by Guillaume Badet. It's a light. A sculpture by Rachel Verghis. And this kinetic piece by Mika Rottenberg. And so in my horizon, in the future, I think a Celia Paul work. And I like Chantal Joffre.
So you already answered another question I had, which is what you have your eye on.
Well, then I also have what I call this buying wish list, like bucket list.
How do you actually keep track of everything?
Oh, it's all in my head. Yeah, totally. I see a work and I just think, I'm going to have you. And I just come back to it over and over again. I've got a list in my head, which is probably about 15 pieces. And I just think, some are out of my reach and some are just not available and nothing has come that's close to it. I also have jewelry. I buy jewelry, artist jewelry. So I have a few pieces on hold, so actually I should say a Babetto piece, a ring, and a Louise Bourgeois necklace, which I'm hoping comes back. It's away at the moment, so I want to see that. This looks amazing.
Are you quite decisive when you see a piece that you like?
Yeah,
you see it and I want that one.
Almost invariably.
Yeah.
So I cannot explain that to anyone. I look at it and I love it, but I'm sure there is something working here that has taken a lot of different bits of information and condensed it and spat out something that's given me some kind of framework to buy. Okay, but it isn't something I can even tell you because it seems so very instinctively done.
Yeah.
Even if it doesn't seem it, there seems to be a real coherence in my collection. I don't think it's all that obvious to everyone else, But I also am very, very sure that a lot of the artworks that I have pin me to a time in my life, So perhaps the coherence is just chronological.
How would you describe your collection in one word?
Oh, it's definitely eclectic, I think.
Yeah.
And slightly unsettling. People have come in. I can remember having Patrick Goddard, The Six Walls of Birds, which was up for a long time.
I saw pictures of that.
Yeah.
Unbelievable.
So I remember when I bought the work, all the dead birds were on the floor. And I just walked past it, and that's a purchase from Frieze, and I just thought, oh my God. And I walked around, I came back and I thought, oh my God, of course I'm going to have 180 dead lead birds. It was just, that was it. Like, it was my work. When I think back, or even if I say it out loud, how batshit that sounds, how crazy that sounds. I think he stole the lead and he boiled it up in his backyard and he cast dead ringneck parakeets. Dead. They had to be dead and smashed up. So I have 180 dead ringneck parakeets. And they're really heavy. They go between 2 and 5 kilos each. And then when I bought it, he said, well, you got to put it on the floor. And I said, well, I can't. I've got a dog and a son. I mean, I can't have 180 birds on the floor. Could we put it on the wall? And he said, no, they're not made for the wall. And so he wouldn't sell it to me. But then I went back after the fair and I said, I really want this work, but it has to go on the wall. There's just no way. So he made each sculpture have a little piano wire with a nail.
Yeah.
And then it was all the walls. And then after that, it was just like the most unsettling thing.
Yeah.
You'd go into this lounge room and it would just be 180 dead birds on the wall. I remember once this poor lady came in one of these tours and she came late and the talk had started and she fainted because she walked in my front door and she looked up at the wall and I have a photograph by Patrina Hicks, which is a girl eating a bird in the mouth. And then she turned the corner into my lounge room and she saw 180 birds on the floor, on the wall. And she just started hyperventilating and she fell to the floor because she has a bird phobia.
No way.
Yeah.
What are the chances?
So I think she came into the house. She saw this woman eating a bird, and then she walked into the lounge room. So 6 walls of birds, and just that was it. Oh, that was the end of the night. And, so you never know how people react. And this was a slightly more extreme reaction, but it was quite funny. And lots of, anecdotal tales like that I have from
I can
opening
imagine.
my home. People loving or hating things. I've got such vitriol. I've also said that's just really don't like your art. Thank you for having me. Okay.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
People
People
said
are,
that.
I think it lends itself to being really honest, whether you like it or not. You
Yeah.
come in. I've also made everything very accessible. I don't put things on pedestals. I don't put things, if I can, behind glass. So the art feels very embedded, interwoven into the space.
Yeah.
I'm also very relaxed about how people smoke in there and they drink and they can touch things, It never feels like
Yeah, you really live with
a
it.
museum. Yeah,
Yeah.
I don't like it. I never liked going into homes where you can look at things, you have to be so careful, you have to knock something down, or you can't, God forbid your sleeve touches a painting. Or
Mm.
I hate houses like that. I hate living with art like that.
Yeah,
It has
yeah.
to be very, very accessible for me, and I've made it so for me.
And then finally, I wanted to ask you if there is a collector, so a fellow collector or a patron that you really look up to.
I can tell you that as a class of collecting, I really am drawn to women collectors.
Why?
I cannot fully put my finger on it, but the sensibility of females who collect. I think women collect so instinctively, emotionally, that when I walk into a collector's home and it's invariably a female collector who's put the arts on the wall, I feel I'm totally drawn to them. And I think that is because they tend to less worry about, is this a blue chip piece of artwork that's going to make me money and I'm going to have to sell it in a couple of years, etc. Then there's a disjointedness of it all. So I'll say there's a whole bunch of female collectors, I won't name, that I love, and I love how they collect, and I am drawn more to that than anything else. Yeah, I'll say that.
Thank you, Rachel.
Oh, thank you for having me. It was nice to talk about it, actually. Nice not to prepare.
Thank you. I really appreciate
Anytime.
it.
Anytime.
That's it for today's episode of The Collector's Corner. If you enjoyed it, do follow the show and leave a short rating or review on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. It really helps more people find these conversations. And if you've got thoughts, feedback, or someone you think I should talk to next, I'd love to hear from you. Just drop me a message on Instagram or through the website, thecollectorscornerpodcast.com. Thank you for listening and for being part of this growing community. Until next time.